Welcome to session 2 of this 8-part webinar series, Mindfulness on the Go. Before we begin, I just want to have a couple of logistics announcements, two of them. One is that we are actually going to start video recording of this, as well as we have the recording of the previous session as well. And we are trying to upload this on YouTube. We have not done it yet, but we will try to do it. If you feel we should not do it for some reason, please let us know, send us an email and we will consider it. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and upload them. Second thing is we will end this session at after an hour, which is 8 p.m. IST. And for some reason, if you don't get a chance to discuss your question or observation, again, please send us an email and happy to chat. Yeah. We began last session with the subtitle of the book. Actually, it is Connecting with the Real You. And we focused on the word connect. What does it mean to learn to connect? And we started with a hypothesis, which is that we have a tendency to be lost in thought. Human mind has a tendency to be lost in thought. And we use different metaphors. So a couple of them I'll just recap. We said it's about learning to balance between berry picking and bookkeeping. And many of us contributed to what berry picking and bookkeeping might mean to each of us. For example, berry picking could mean spontaneity, novelty, freshness, being in the present, being like a kid. And bookkeeping would mean worrying about the future, planning something, being like an adult, feeling responsible. And we also had questions like, does it have to be one or the other? Or could there be a synthesis of these two? We also used another metaphor, which is learning to balance the bicycle of life. We didn't spend too much time, but the bicycle that was referred here was not something that necessarily turned left when we turned the handle left. The bicycle had bias, which means when we turn the handle left, it could turn right, but it could turn left also. And riding such a bicycle is something which is tricky. So these are the two things we said, we will learn. Now you might ask, if I have to learn to balance, let's say between berry picking and bookkeeping, how do I do it? And one response of this could be that I have solved so many problems in life. This is just another problem. I could solve it. And how do I typically solve my problems? Using thought. I, in fact, get paid because of my thinking process. I have learned so many skills. So why not I use the same thought process to solve this problem also? And this is where we are going to really explore, is this possible? Is there any caution that we should use? Or is it actually an impractical question? So this is today's agenda. And joining me in this exploration today is Gauri. Gauri has been my friend for the last 30 years and my better half for the last 27 years. During this time, she would have caught me off balance innumerable times. And like Lachi asked Kishan, is this the time to do this kind of question she would have asked several times. And my guess is I would have answered the same way Kishan does. Of course, I'm right, you know. So the game is more often like a deuce in tennis, and then it goes advantage and deuce again. Um, when I met her 30 years ago, she was doing her master's in physics. And even today, she's a physics teacher. She tutors online for the last 2 years. And in fact, yesterday she had her 50th student, and her students are so far have been from 7 countries. So welcome, Gauri.
Thank you.
Now, the second chapter is titled Listening to Mental Shotgun. Gauri, what does mental shotgun mean to you?
Yeah, to understand this, let us go back a little bit. So even before the book was conceptualized, Vinay has been bringing up all these discussions in the house. And this journey of mindfulness, although it wasn't called mindfulness at the time, okay, it's been going on in the house for a long time. So one of the things that he brought is this book called Slow and Fast and Slow Thinking. It's by Daniel Kahneman, and Kahneman is a Nobel laureate in economics. However, he is a psychologist. So what are these two modes of thinking? Okay, one is the fast mode, which is quick, involuntary, and almost automatic. Okay, it is like we don't even realize that we are thinking in a particular direction. Whereas in contrast to that, the slow mode of thinking, it involves reasoning and caution. So for example, when we have to do 29 times 67 or some such numbers, it takes a certain process and it requires time. So that's a slow mode of thinking. But very often we are thinking in the fast mode, which is automatic, because we don't have to do too much of work. We don't want to spend too much energy in thinking. So fast mode also involves doing multiple assessments parallelly, and it plays an important role in our survival. On the other hand, it plays a crucial role in our understanding and our decisions. Just a moment, I have to admit someone. Yeah, I'm also doing this parallelly in the fast mode. So let me just admit this person. Yes. Let me give you an example from my background. Okay, when I was teaching in school, it was for a long time I was teaching in this international school, and we were supposed to judge the students based on their ability and how they perform in the test and so on and so forth. So I used to put them into compartments of grades. Okay, this person is an A star and this person is an A. And what used to happen is, this used to happen in the first few weeks of teaching. I would have made my impression. And I used to say that, okay, this guy is going to become somebody big. He will study and he will become, say, a manager, and somebody will become a scientist or an engineer. And I used to have a class of students who were good for nothing. And this impression used to form very quickly. Now, almost 15, 16 years later, when some of these students, I come across them on social media, I realized that my judgment was very wrong. So I feel this was my mental shotgun, okay, which was firing just by looking at the face of the student. So I now realize, but Vinay, can you elaborate more on how quickly we judge people and what could be implications of that?
Thanks, Gauri. That was a good example. So this fast mode of thinking is something we use uh, very often. I mean, this is what is operating most of the time. Let's say 95, 99% of the time. How fast is this fast mode? I guess there may not be exact answers, but one of the things research suggests and Kahneman suggests is that in 1/10 of a second, we usually form our judgment. Let's see. Okay. Okay. So 1/10 of a second, which means 100 milliseconds or maybe perhaps couple of 100 milliseconds, we would have already formed the judgments. Now there are election times and we are judging the candidates. There are people around us. Now, one way to understand how these judgments happen so quickly and so difficult to change, let us look at the example which is used in the book of an optical illusion, okay, which is a Necker's cube. It's a simple one, but I think it still illustrates the point. So I'm going to just share the screen and just show this image of this cube. Okay. Now, hope all of you can see this picture. So there are these three parts. One is A, which is the Necker cube, and B and C are two possible modes in which we can see this picture. So you have to just check and see whether do you see the cube more like B or more like C. It would be one of the two. Just let's take a couple of seconds for you to see which one do you really see.
You can write down in the chat box if you want.
And let's say first I'm seeing it more like B right now. Then the idea would be to really see, can I also see it like C? Yeah, so one is protruding to the left and the other is kind of coming out towards the right. So if it's coming out to the right, you see, okay, can I see it coming out to the left also? And you'll see that you can't see both at the same time. You can only see one of them. And this is an example of what is called a bistable optical illusion, which means it has two stable states. And they are indicated by this B and C. And why is it illusion? Because first of all, it's not a three-dimensional picture. It's just a two-dimensional diagram. But we can't help it but see it in 3 dimensions, like a three-dimensional object. And we only see one or the other. Now let's imagine a fictitious scenario that the people who see it like B are called leftist, and the people who see like C are the right-wing people. And they don't change this perspective at all, which means one sees only like B and the other sees only like C. And they start fighting and they say, look, I feel B is real, and somebody says C is real. And they end up killing each other and so on. So, but this is, you might say this is ridiculous. But in many ways, what Kahneman is suggesting is that our impressions, that is our judgments, are very similar to this optical illusions, which means they are fast, they are automatic, and they have a bias, which means either you see it more like B or more like C. So either you see somebody as good or bad, or somebody is right or wrong, right? And There's also question getting raised as to whether it's possible that it's neither right or wrong, like this cube. Could this be an illusion, right? In the sense, your belief could be true or relevant for a certain context, but there may be another context in which it is not correct. So this is an example of how stubborn or the illusions can be. Gauri, can you give an example of cognitive illusion in your context?
Yeah, so cognitive illusion can create an overconfidence in your belief system, and it can create a feeling that everything else is not important. What you believe, that is the only true things, and you tend to appreciate the things that you believe in. So in my case, I used to think that science is the only way to know about the universe, and my passion in astronomy and astrophysics was there. So I used to feel that all other subjects are not worth studying or not even worth looking at and spending your life in it. I kept studying science for many decades and ignored everything else. I kept teaching that. However, in the past 10 to 15 years, I started exploring history, fine arts, and I realized the fallacy in my understanding. I wasn't paying attention to other subjects, not knowing what was in them. And now my opinions are changing as I dabble in different things. So when on page 24, you have mentioned about circular relationship between what we see and what we believe. Could you throw some light on that, the circular relationship between seeing and believing?
Sure, let me try. Okay, so I'm actually, okay, let me just see if I can use a little bit of whiteboard here so I'm going to share the screen. Let's say I'm going to share the whiteboard. Okay. Now, what is being suggested here is that we tend to see what we believe. Okay, so and this is called what you believe is what you see. Okay, this is based on what is called confirmation bias. Let me just say what you believe is what you see. Now, this is not so difficult for us to see, because if I have an impression of, let's say, a politician to be a good guy, then I will seek, filter, and interpret only that information which confirms my belief. That's what confirmation belief says. That once I have a belief, then I will seek, filter, and interpret only that data which confirms my belief. Now, of course, Google and Facebook and all the social media is only helping it because they know what I like. So they are only going to show me that news, because only then I will click and they might get money through advertisement. So this is the first bias. Sometimes it's called my side bias, because I am only seeing what I believe, right? So this is the first one. The second bias says visiarity, which is what you see is all there is. So I'm saying that whatever I see is all there is. There is nothing else. What you see is all there is. Which means whatever information I see, I just say that's what truth is. And what does it do? It confirms my belief. It's like my voice in the head, or somebody is, oh, look, didn't I tell you this is what it is? See, this is what the data shows. So first of all, I'm only sampling that data which confirms my belief. And then I say that's what truth is. And I say, oh, it just confirms my belief. So it further strengthens what I believe already. So essentially, you can see it's kind of a circular trap, you can say, or you can say it's a reinforcing loop where if I form first impression, like Gauri mentioned, a first impression about a student, then this reinforcing loop will only confirm it. I will only seek that data which shows the student to be in that way, and so on. So question comes is, if really there is this loop, is there a way out at all? Is there a way out? Where do you break this loop? I mean, let's just stare at this loop. What you believe is what you see, and what you see is all there is. Maybe let's pause here. Let's just ask somebody, where do you think this loop can be broken? Possibly, if at all can be, or maybe there is no way out. Is there a way out? Yeah, let's just.
Vinay, maybe you want to look at the chat box. We have Sagar saying that the story of 6 blind men and elephant. Yeah, this is exactly similar to that. Just look at it, and also
And maybe let's ask. So Jonathan, can you elaborate a little bit as to what you're saying?
Maybe you can read it and
can anybody hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm not very technologically competent here, so.
No worries.
Well, it's certainly my experience, as you were saying, Vinay, about the 2 cubes, that you can only see, even if you are comfortable and practiced at looking at the 2 cubes in the 2 different ways, you can still only see one of them, one of the ways at any one time. So I think it is true, for me at least, that what I see is, my brain is going to make a story about whatever is in front of me and what I'm seeing. And I just need to be with that, because whatever it is going to change. And either I'm going to stay open to the change, or I'm going to make my mind up and move on.
Okay. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Really nice. Thank you. Let's ask Kavita. You're trying to say something?
Yeah. So am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I can ask myself, what else can I see? Maybe that could be one of the tool to break the loop.
Okay, that's a good start. Let's also ask if Sagar, are you want to add something here?
Yeah, so what I think Kavita's point is, if you ask yourself consciously and if you make effort yourself, that's one way. But for many people who are biased to their own opinion, that may not happen. And so either you have a life or death experience, or that completely shakes your belief, or someone like J. Krishnamurti comes along and questions you, and then that actually gives you a completely different perspective. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, I think both have a point. I think what Kavita is trying to say, if I understand correctly, is that the second aspect, which is what you see is all there is. This is the area in which he's saying, okay, can I say, okay, could there be something more that I don't see, which could change it, right? Maybe what I see is not all there is. Maybe there is more to what I see, more than what I see, right? So I feel that's an area, and I think in some sense, what Sagar is saying is that if you're willing to listen to somebody who has an opinion different from yours, right? When somebody says, "Hey, boss, you could be wrong actually," and that person could be seeing something different or something more than I'm able to see. Can I listen to that? Is a possibility, right? So what we are saying is the first part, which is what you believe is what you see, is really something which happens automatically, and I may have no clue and no control and no awareness of how that happens. On the other hand, maybe this awareness is there when somebody is saying something, or at least carry this awareness like what Kavita is saying, that, oh, maybe what I see is not all there is, right? So this is one possibility that we are suggesting, and it's something that you have to really experiment and see. Yeah, yeah, like Nitin is also saying, start to see what others are saying. So this is let me just now anybody else to add, want to add anything here, any question here before we move on?
Can I add a thought here?
Please.
So this is Vipul. I think one of the possibilities is also, if there is somebody we can ask,
Yeah.
is there something which I'm not able to see?
Yes.
Or is there a belief, or is there another belief which is available?
Yeah.
And the belief through which one can look at life or a situation.
Yeah.
And hence, maybe finding somebody who can help us see more could be of help.
Yeah, thanks. I think Vipul, that's a good suggestion. In the sense, if I understand correctly, what you're saying is actively seek out different opinions, right? Ask people, and this is a tricky part, by the way, because we of course have friends who are there because they think more like me, right? My friends are somebody who are like me. But people who are thinking really different from me, what Vipul is suggesting, okay, can I actually seek out and say, okay, hey, what do you see and why do you see? I mean, elaborate a little more and so on, right? So yeah, that's a possibility too. Anyone else? Anybody has anything?
I think Sunil ji has he has posted something. Vinay?
Yeah, I'm just taking, yeah. Sunil, do you want to add something here?
Hey, hi, Vinay. Nice to be in touch with you again.
Please.
So what I have posted is when a person reviews the belief
Okay.
from a lens of how is that belief serving you.
Okay.
And typically what we call it as limiting belief. So the moment when a person realizes that this belief is not serving me, it is only then when I start looking at it, oh, there is something else which is possible.
Yeah.
And that's what it triggers, and that's why new possibilities get generated.
Sure. Yep. Thank you. Good question. So let's take one example which we have discussed actually in the book, which is from this movie 12 Angry Men. We'll not be showing it here. Let me just stop sharing for now. So Gauri, you have been using this movie in your class, theory of knowledge class, for a number of years.
Yeah.
What has been your experience of 12 Angry Men?
Yeah, it's based on a wonderful play by the same name, 12 Angry Men. And this play, it has got these 12 jurors. And there is a very young boy, like 17-year old young boy, a very young fellow. And they are looking into the case. Okay, the boy's father was killed, and they are saying that the murderer is this boy. Now, when I used to show this to my 16 and 17-year-old students, they used to have a shock. Okay, because the story unfolds very slowly. Okay, the 11 men are caught up in their beliefs, and they are saying that the boy is murderer, and the reason they give is it's because he comes from a particular social status, he comes from a particular race. They are not really looking at the facts. Okay, they are blindfolded because they are just thinking that what they think is the reality. And slowly this movie shows up, and students used to love this. And every time I showed this to my students, okay, I used to find out newer aspects of my thinking. Okay, it was really nice. In fact, it's the play really explains what mental shotgun can do. But my question to Vinay, you Vinay, now is that can you explain how this play it connects the mental shotgun part and mindfulness? Yeah, also somebody is mentioning Ek Ruka Hua Faisla. There was a Hindi version. Yes, Mohan, you're right. We used to see this in the 80s on the Doordarshan in India. Yeah. So how is the mental shotgun and mindfulness? Okay, what's the connection between them?
The first thing this is trying to suggest is that our judgments are a result of fast mode of thinking. And fast mode of thinking has these three characteristics at least. One is that it is extremely fast, quick. Second is it is automatic, which means it happens involuntarily. And third characteristic is that it carries biases. Our beliefs automatically create certain biases. We like certain things, we don't like certain things. So the fast mode of thinking, or what is called this mental shotgun, it is firing all the time, fast, automatic, and in a biased manner. And then that distorts our perception. In fact, our thinking is like seeing in that manner, right? So it's almost like we don't see clearly because it is colored by our beliefs. What I believe is what I see, really, right? So our thinking is like our seeing. Now, what this play also highlights is that when somebody shows an evidence, one of the scene is when a knife is shown, which is very similar to the knife that is showcased there, and the person says, "Look, this was available in the same area." So maybe somebody could have bought this knife and used it. Um, most of the jurors are not ready to look at that. In fact, there's one juror who is saying, "This is impossible. I don't want to change my opinion." So many times our openness to look and listen is very, very limited. And one way this connects to mindfulness is to suggest that mindfulness is a process of learning to listen with possibility, which means whatever somebody else is saying, and it could be very different from my opinion, could I listen with a possibility that maybe that could be true? So this is one of the possibilities that this is suggesting. The other thing is, could I just even learn to observe the mental shotgun firing? Just watch the shotgun. Just know, oh, see, the shotgun is firing. Could I observe that? Just observe that. And of course, it's suggested that it's much easier to observe it when somebody else's shotgun is firing. When somebody else is judging, that's far easier. But when my shotgun is firing, it's almost truth for me. So to observe my shotgun is also a learning process.
Can I read something from here, from
Okay.
your book?
Okay.
I am on Kindle version, so I'm not really knowing the page number. When maybe you can fill in. I'm reading this part. Most of us are not asked to sit in a courtroom or and judge a murder case. However, we are judging people and events around us all the time. Sometimes we are judging Padmavat protesters, and sometimes our family members, friends, people on the street, or politicians in the news. The mental shotgun is making sure that the verdict is arrived at really fast. The point is, can we carry a feeling of I could be wrong for every verdict? Now, I have a question to ask you over here.
Yeah.
Most of the time when we are judging, we are not in a mood to really think that there could be an other story. We are so blinded. So how do we really come out of that blind belief that we are correct?
Yeah, I mean, we know that it's.
I don't know if there is an open answer, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it's an experimentation to be done, right? What are the kind of experiments? One experiment we are suggesting is, first of all, can I just watch the shotgun firing, which means my judgments, every time I look at something, the story is almost like seeing, right? I see somebody is good, somebody is not so good, something is right, something is not right. And it happens extremely fast. Can I first just watch this? That could be one. And the other is to actually listen to, just learning to listen to some suggestion, right? That when you say, for example, to me, hey, is this the time to do this, right? Could I listen to you really? Or you know, that's an experiment, right? I mean, maybe it'll work, maybe not. But as an experiment, it's worth trying. That's the suggestion. Yeah. Any other point at this? Yeah, comments, observations. Has anybody tried, experimented with either observing your mental shotgun, which is your judgments which are firing, or this listening experiment for that matter?
Well, yes, I'll say this. I'm 65 years old, and I feel like I'm entering. I'm rounding the curve on the last lap here for my life, for looking at a long last lap. And one of the things that has been wonderful over the last few years is to realize that we human beings are story-making machines. And this mental shotgun is firing, perhaps, as you say, if we can make up a story or interpret something within 10, microseconds or milliseconds, that's how fast the mental shotgun is firing. We're wired to make our mind up about stuff very quickly, but a lot of that I think we got to by survival-based, needing to act quickly. And in the world in which we live, we're not threatened that much. And it's been a wonderful thing for me to see the tide recede at my age, how much our beliefs are just constantly pushing us around. And so the advice that you were just saying about just watch is, I see myself in young people who just have a belief system, and, that's it.
Yep. Thanks for sharing, Jonathan. Anybody?
I think Mohan has a point there. Just check, Vinay.
Yeah, Mohan, do you want to share something?
He has posted there. But...
Okay. So you can. Okay.
Basically, why not start thinking that I may be wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I start this way, only then I can pick the berries.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's a, of course, that's a suggestion. That's a very good suggestion.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, Kavita.
Yeah, self-awareness could play an important role to break that.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the self-awareness part?
Self-awareness in terms of how I respond to various triggers. We all have individual responses. If I understand what triggers a particular kind of thinking or feeling or behavior in me is unique to me
Yeah.
and not universal.
Yeah.
So I might see things, understand things, believe things differently than all the others.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Vijay.
Yeah, just Vinay, I would like to share my one experience because we have one training called relationship management with Mr. Homi Mullah. I'd like to share one incident because this training is for 6 days, and and you have to work with the small group. Always you have to you have to live with that group particular. It is a residential program. So end of I think it is a day 5. So you have to stand in front of all your team members, and they will tell about everything about you, good, bad, everything, and you have to accept. See, 1 hour they will talk about you, and you need not to you cannot allowed to say even single word. So whatever they say, you have to accept. And see, when we started that exercise, we believe that it is not going to help us, but after completing that, it was totally different. Means you will come to know your strength that you never thought of it, and you know your weaknesses also. I think I'll say that is a good example of self realization, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So it's possible that sometimes this can happen in a more structured manner, and where you are placed to accept the feedback along with your friends. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Anyone has anything?
Yeah,
I think Vipul wanted to say something.
Yeah, Vipul, please. Yeah.
so I'm, interesting point, and I've been wondering about it. One thing which looks like a paradox is if I operate from the place that I could be wrong, then I come across as a certain way as a leader.
Yeah.
And in the meetings, when people are looking at me,
Yeah.
if I constantly come across as somebody who's unsure,
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's the right thing is the first thing which I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, while I completely understand the concept and I'm trying to say where can I apply it in my life,
Right.
and this is one challenge which I see. The second challenge I'm seeing is that if everything is up for debate, then
Yeah.
there are so many debates which will stand up and become alive.
Yeah.
And I have to kind of mentally carry of these debates, because in some sense, when I kind of pass a mental judgment on them, this is good or this is bad, the debate ends.
Yeah.
And it kind of give me respite from not carrying it further. So a lot of debates can come out open. I'm just, asking you and everybody on the meet is that I completely agree that this is useful. Could this become a real problem, and is there a way to solve for it, or it's only me and my own perception, and hence I'm using this forum to ask me, is it my bias, or this could be real, one that I can come across as tentative and that may not work for me.
Yeah.
And two, I could open up tons of debate which I may have to mentally carry. So is it my bias, or it could be a problem, or is there a solution to it?
Right. So I think, first of all, fantastic question. For those who don't know, Vipul is actually a CEO of a company. So you can understand the realness of his question. As a CEO in his meetings, your tentativeness can be judged, in certain ways. So Vipul, I have one thought that let me share that, and then maybe we can see where it goes. First of all, I agree that decision making, whether you're a CEO or not, you have to take decisions in life. And every time you take a decision, you just say, well, I'm not so sure, then things may not actually move forward. So at some level, you need to take decision. Can we say that I'm taking this decision based on certain assumptions about the context, about the environment, about our skill sets, our capabilities? And assuming, let's say you're running a company, then about a competitive scenario of a company. These are a set of assumptions based on which we feel this is currently a good way forward. And what it means is, when I portray myself like that, tomorrow when some of the assumptions change, I can go back to the board and say, look, we took a certain decision and these were the assumptions we had put forward. Here is a change scenario. Something has changed, technology has changed, competition has changed, something has changed, regulation has changed. Is this a time to relook at our decision, right? So in which case, you have certain firmness at any point, but also you are open about the assumptions which is guiding that decision. I'm not sure if that's practical, but that's just one suggestion that I have.
Thanks, Vinay. It makes sense. And I saw some of the messages. So any other, suggestion to me, it'll be helpful.
Vivek, I just have one thought. Is that I don't think we can, the automatic mode has a purpose and it works in many aspects of our life. So judging every action, I don't think would be the goal, in my opinion. But what I think we are suggesting here is to be open when you sense there is a conflict. And you sense that, and at that point you have an ability to look at that other aspect. In normal mode, it may be going as usual, and it's the skills and the knowledge that we have accumulated, hone on. But when there is a conflict, and when you see that there is a conflict occurring, if you are sensible, maybe it will allow you to see other options more openly. That's how I think I take this as, this particular topic.
Yep. Thanks for sharing. That's also, beautifully put. That whenever there is a conflict. Yeah, Swati, you're.
Yeah, hi. What I feel is if we start questioning every thought that we have or every situation, thinking that I could be wrong, I feel that will have a negative impact on us. So that is my belief. So I could be wrong. So it's not only the CEO, it's any simple person who's making decisions every day, multiple decisions every day. So I feel that we should definitely, the mental shotgun will fire, but we need to think, as Vivek said, when there is a conflict or when somebody is questioning us, at that time we can pause and reflect. But I feel every situation, if we think that I could be wrong, it could have a negative impact on us.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think these are very good points. So it looks like conflicting situations where of course differing opinions are expressed, is when this makes more sense. Thanks for sharing that.
So hi, Binayji. Yeah. So I think is, look, when there are things which you find that's not a smooth. That's something is going wrong, or if there is a pattern, then having this mindset would be pretty useful And I can bring an example from what Peter Senge said is inquiry with advocacy, right? So sorry, advocacy with inquiry. So you may be pretty sure about some idea, even still in that sense, and if you are trying to bring all the evidences saying it, still you're inquiring it, you're open about it. And the other element which Peter Senge brings to that is a suspended judgment. Can I suspend my judgment for some time, a while, and look at it? I think that I can relate to it like that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mukesh. Vipul, your second question, I kind of lost the second question. What did we? What was it?
Yeah, I think it partly got answered. I think what I was saying is that how many decisions can we leave open?
Yeah.
Or how many debates can we open?
That's correct.
Because more open things in the mind can lead to more mental fatigue.
Yeah.
And hence so what I hear groups saying is that open up those ones where either there is a resistance, constraint, it's not working out, there is a conflict. Rest of them are good to go, and let them be.
Yeah.
And examine the ones which are not working out is how I kind of summarize the responses in my mind.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Vinay, can I also add one more thing?
Yeah, please.
Sunil here. Yeah, very good conversation. And see, from my side, I have one more point to add. See, all what we are talking about here is being aware of our bias, right? And having a bias is, as we all know, is not something which we can avoid. Now, this has to be looked contextually. If as a leader, I am in a situation where my job is to say enroll, or to give a listening, or to get a perspective, then definitely I will approach it that, okay, there is a possibility that something different, something new is available at the other end. So let me give it a listening. And there's nothing wrong in that, because there you are actually looking from an end perspective of taking the team along, or either influencing or enrolling, or whatever may be the case. If as a leader, we are in a space where we are communicating a decision, so all what we are doing is we are just rationalizing and communicating a decision. But in all the cases, the way I look at it is, what is the end goal? Keeping in mind the end goal, being aware of our cognition bias is how I will operate in any situation. And that is how we have to look at it. So as a leader, it is not always that we have to relook ourselves or doubt our decisions. It's about a context and what's the end goal that we have in our mind. And keeping that in mind, I think it's very easy to operate, being aware and what's it that we want to achieve.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Sunil. I agree that having an end goal is very helpful. Sometimes, of course, without knowing, we get locked up in an end goal. An end goal can become non-negotiable because of the bias, and that could also be a challenge where I'm not able to actually shift and question the goal itself. Yeah. So I also want to, now that we have got 5 minutes, let me try to just summarize briefly, and then we'll see if we have questions. So first thing we try to say, and we use the optical illusion as an example to begin with, is like we think like we see. When we see the Necker cube, we see only one of them, even though we know I'm seeing it for, nth time. I still see only one of the ways in which it comes out at a time, which means that the fast mode which is operating is extremely quick, it is automatic, and it is biased. Now that's the first thing we are saying. We are saying that I may not be even aware of the bias. To say that I will be aware of the bias is actually being extremely ambitious. Kahneman, who is the author of the book, says that after having written the book, he is as old as my father, 86 years old. He says that he has not changed much after having written. Okay, so there are two awareness here. What we are saying is being aware of the specific bias is very difficult. But I think being aware that I am biased is perhaps a little easier. And that needs to be experimented and see. So that's the first thing we are saying. I think like I see, fast, automatic, and biased way. And that's something you can perhaps experiment and see. Now, the second aspect I want to bring about is by actually framing a question that will carry forward in perhaps all through the rest of the session. What are we trying to do? It has 4 parts, so just bear with me. First thing we are saying is we are trying to learn. Mindfulness is about learning. How we are learning. Okay, so that's part number 1. Learning to do what? Learning to see clearly. We are trying to see clearly because we just don't see. What I believe is what I see. So part 1, we are trying to learn. Learn to see clearly. Third part is despite fast, automatic, and biased thinking, which means my thinking is most likely going to be, can't be for sure, fast, automatic, and biased. So I want to learn to see clearly despite fast, automatic, and biased thinking modes. And last part, anytime, anywhere. That's the way I have posed the question, to which the book is a response, where we want to learn to see more clearly despite fast, automatic, and biased way of thinking, anytime, not only 6 o'clock in the morning with cross-legged and closed eyes. That's fine too, because my mode, my shotgun is firing all the time. I'm going to have resistance and conflict situation anytime, anywhere. And I may have time. I may want to just play with it. I may want to question, oh, this judgment that I'm forming, I just want to experiment. Could I be wrong? I think that's a playful experimentation. When I strongly feel, oh, this presidential candidate is dead wrong, or this particular politician is dead right, just as an experiment, can I just say, oh, would I be wrong here? I feel it's a good experiment, because just see what happens. Do I feel inside a little resistance building up, and so on? So this is the way I have framed the question, and I thought I want to articulate that.
Perhaps just feeling, just looking at one of your strongest beliefs and thinking about it in silence and seeing what are the responses that your body is generating. I think that's what you have said in the end of the chapter. So feel the resistance in your body. So
yeah, that could be a good experiment.
Just sitting at one place and thinking about things that give you pain or anger. So when nothing is happening, doing an experiment on yourself, sitting in a comfortable place and position.
Yeah. I think sometimes writing a diary might help here as well, just to see, especially conflict situations which have occurred. You might be able to bring out the beliefs and just see, okay, this is what happened. Was this the belief at play? Might help. Yeah. So looks like our time is up. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I enjoyed it, and hope you had something to take away as well. So hope to see you next
Yeah,
week.
please send us emails if you have
Feedback, any questions?
any feedback and any questions.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for
next
being
week's,
there.
maybe you can just make an announcement for next week, Vinay.
Yeah. So next week
Next
is
week is it
yeah, 10th,
Kavita?
right?
Is it?
Yeah, Kavita
Yeah.
will be our co-host.
Yeah, Kavita is here. I think you can
Kavita
just,
Desai.
Yeah, Dr. Kavita Desai.
Yeah.
So wonderful to have you. Yeah. See you next week. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Asha, would you like to say something? My mom. Would you like to say something?